And welcome back on Take Action News with David Shuster. This is Daniel Marins hosting today, Saturday, March 30th. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. Michael Lind. He's the author of Land of Promise, An Economic History of the United States, and the co-founder of the New America Foundation. And we're discussing a three-part series in Salon that Dr. Lind authored about rich moochers, the rent-seeking wealthy class in society, and how they are essentially hogging the wealth and productivity of the rest of us. Now, Michael, I was looking at, in your second column, how rich moochers hurt America. You talked about monopolies just now, and of course there's the issue of copyrights and patents and how they go on forever and ever and force us to pay higher prices and prevent innovators from entering the market. And of course there's the low taxes that they extract as a result of their concentrated political power. But then there's the issue of before tax income as it is affected by anti-inflationary macroeconomic policy. And of course that's both Federal Reserve policy in terms of how high or low they keep rates, how creative they get with buying up private assets, and our dollar policy, how much we make that a priority.
That's absolutely right. And progressives who are just against banking and business as such tend to miss these nuances. What is good for industry is not necessarily good for the fire sector and for these rentiers. And I'll give you a couple of examples. A strong dollar, a very high dollar vis-a-vis other currencies, is terrible for American industries because it makes American exports more expensive in other countries. It's wonderful if you're a financier because it allows you to buy up assets in other countries, including developing countries. And then you can just make income from them. It doesn't do anything to add to the productive base of the U.S. the way exports do, but it can enrich the financial sector. So the financial sector tends to be in favor of a strong high dollar, even though this cripples American manufacturing. Another example is paranoia about inflation, since a lot of the rentiers are creditors. That is, they're loaning their money out at interest rates. That's the source of much of their income. Inflation has always been the friend of the debtor because it allows debtors to pay back their creditors in nominally the same but ever lower amounts, unless it's all adjusted for inflation. So what you see is the rich in the United States and in other countries, this is nothing new. It was true 100 years ago and it will be true 100 years from now, would live in fear that tight labor markets can drive up inflation, as they do sometimes. And it's not that they're deliberately creating unemployment, but if you're a creditor and you're worried about inflation, a slightly higher level of unemployment with lower inflation is preferable because it serves your interest rather than lower unemployment if that is accompanied by wage-driven inflation.
And of course, we've seen that in the recovery from the recent economic recession, that Republicans and conservatives in particular have cried foul at the idea of debasing the American dollar, of the Fed sort of flooding the market with our currency, of lowering rates too far. And as you're pointing out, though it doesn't sound great, the debasing of our dollar is great for American exports and therefore great for manufacturing and probably better for organized labor and middle-class standards of living in the country. And on the other side, the Federal Reserve policy in terms of how loose, how much money it prints, that is also important because that can help drive demand and increase employment. And there's very little risk. Certainly we have more leeway at this point before we reach a point where the inflation is dangerous to the economy as a whole.
That's absolutely right. And there's another aspect of the current debate which just shows how much discussion has been warped by the disproportionate power of this finance-based rentier class. And that has to do with the supposed crisis over Social Security and Medicare and this push to privatize everything. There are enormous amounts of money to be made by investors if you either privatize Social Security and Medicare, or failing that, cut them to such low levels that all Americans, with the help of tax incentives, are forced, if not more or less compelled by necessity, to purchase supplementary insurance in old age and supplementary private sector annuities. So that explains why the financial sector is spending tens of millions of dollars on things like the Fix the Debt campaign. It's not simply altruistic worry about this terrible crisis of the debt in the year 2020 or 2030. Anything that voucherizes Medicare or reduces Social Security, for example, the chain CPI definition of inflation, which would gradually allow inflation to erode the value of Social Security benefits, will force people to buy private products from the insurance sector and from the annuity sector, and also to try to save more money in the form of investments on Wall Street, where money managers can simply extract hidden fees from unsuspecting middle-class Americans. So there are enormous amounts of money to be made through the privatization and cutting back of the public part of the welfare state.